Roguelike games are some of the craziest games you see. It's a genre of games that mixes with every other genre you can think of, and it feels like every single genre has a high quality roguelite associated with it. They're usually highly replayable, and most of the greatest roguelites of all time are filled to the brim with content, difficulty enhancers, items, and a lot of them have a deep story that some players may tend to ignore, which is not a big deal, but the story will be expertly written. A lot of my videos, I use Hades as a perfect example. Highly replayable game that has a lot of variety with boons, aspect, and weapons, a lot of lore and story to learn if you want, combat that's so fluid it's hard to put down, and of course the great difficulty enhancers. Really, I can think of so many amazing games that do almost everything great. Dead Cells, Binding of Isaac, Slay the Spire, those games are considered some of the best roguelites for a reason. But there's one roguelike game I've always wanted to play, as it seemed like the combat and gameplay was super exciting and it had a great variety in items. But when I did play the game, it was a good time. I just felt more disappointed than I expected. And that game is Wizard of Legend. A great game in some areas, but where did it all begin? Well, first and most important, Wizard of Legend was created by Contingent 99, which is a small indie team formed in 2014 by Bundy Kim and Da-Hoon Lee, two friends who grew up together. Wizard of Legend is their debut title, and I will say it's very impressive for a game made by two people. Now, for a game made by two people, they're gonna need some funds for it. If you don't know, games are more expensive than ever to make, but that's where the amazing website Kickstarter comes in. On June 21st of 2016, Wizard of Legend launched its Kickstarter, and well, it was quite successful. In the first 24 hours, it raised 15% of its initial goal. Their initial goal was about $50,000 US. I'm not a math teacher or anything like that, but if you carry the 3, you can easily see 15% is about $7,500 raised in one day. That's pretty impressive. And exactly 1 month after the initial launch, they did reach their goal of $50,000. And in the end, the game ended up raising almost $75,000 total. And with that, the developers added some stretch goals where they would add more enemies, more relics, and even more bosses and content as a whole. Now, fast forward to a couple years to May 15th of 2018, and the game fully releases. They received a few updates here and there for small things like adding languages and bug fixes, but it got its first major update less than a year later on March 20th of 2019. With the Sky Palace update, which added a whole new area to explore. And then a few months later, to celebrate its 1-year anniversary, the game added a boss rush mode. And then lastly, the game had one more final update in early 2020 with the Thunder and Keep update, which added another new area to explore just like the first update. And really, after that final update, they had some smaller updates here and there, but since September of 2021, there hasn't been any news or updates on Steam or Twitter, so it's safe to say this game is done receiving updates. Almost 2 years with no communication means it's the perfect time for me to come in and rip this game apart. It's super late to the party, by the way, and tell you what I think of the game. I'm gonna tell you everything about the game and really my problems with it. So let's get into it. Firstly, let's go over inside of a run. This one is super simple as the runs are not that long. A run consists of you going through 3 temples, with each temple having 2 main levels filled with enemies, shops, and a mini boss, and then the temple ends with a main boss. Nice and simple stuff. You have 9 levels total before the final boss, basically. The game has 5 temples total with earth, fire, water/ice, I kind of count those as the same, lightning, and air, with each temple type having a few exclusive enemies to them and an exclusive boss. As the run goes on, the enemies and bosses get a little bit harder, as if you get to level 3, the final level, the boss does 5 moves before you are able to stun them to get more damage off. Compared to the first level, they only have 3 moves. So the later in a run you go, the more moves you have to learn. Now, we have the bosses, but let's talk about the stores that every run is filled with. You have stores that allow you to buy relics, which we'll go over in a bit in the next section. Relics give you buffs. You have a store that allows you to trade gold for chaos gems, which are the game's main currencies. Gold is used only in runs, and chaos gems are used outside of a run. A store that allows you to buy new spells, which is important as every spell has a different cooldown, but we'll fully cover spells in one of the next sections as well. And there's a few other things in the game, like trading gold and some health for a buff, or grabbing a cursed relic. I'll be honest, I don't view those stores or like any of the stores like super important, so we're not going to go super in depth on them. And if you manage to get past the 3 temples, you have one final boss who you get to after clearing 3 little tiny areas. You do have 2 final stores to shop at before the boss to stock up, but the final boss has 2 phases, and during the final phase they will throw an array of attacks at you from each element, so you need to come prepared. If you're able to beat the final boss, you get Chaos Arcana, which is what the elements are officially called. Arcana, by the way, just so you know. But you get a Chaos Arcana spell for beating the final boss, and that's basically it. That's everything inside of a run, really. Nothing too crazy. but where the game shines out even more is the variety. So let's get into that next. Like a lot of great roguelites, Wizard of Legend helped keeps itself fresh with a crazy amount of variety with cloaks, relics, curses, and arcane type. We'll save biggest for last, so let's talk about the cloaks first. You can buy cloaks with chaos gems, which you gain in runs, and they allow you to buy everything. But every cloak has two benefits to it compared to the basic starting cloak. The benefits usually correlate with each other, like receiving more heals and more crit heals together. Fun seeing all the variety with them. There's about 17 or 20 cloaks total, I don't remember exactly, but they're fun to see. Next, we have the curses, which are the cursed relics. There's 69 cursed relics total, and they're what you expect. They're a relic that has a negative effect, but some of them can be pretty overpowered. I used one relic while trying to get all the achievements and allowed all hits to do 99 damage, and it made the runs much easier. Granted, you need to dodge a lot and be able to read all the enemies, but hell, it got me that last achievement I needed. And after clearing the game once, you're able to buy a cursed relic to start your run with, but it only lasts the one run. And of course, the opposite of cursed relics is just a regular relic, which just gives you a nice random buff. This number may be wrong, but according to the wiki, the game has 313 relics total. Minus the 69 cursed relics would equal 244 regular relics, and not all of them are that good. But you can buy all of them with chaos gems from a store in the hub world and choose any relic you want to start your run with. And you can hold about 10 relics in a run, so make sure you choose wisely. But if you see a relic you like more, you can just drop it. It's not really that big of a deal. It is fun seeing all the different types of relics the game has to offer though. But lastly, the most important variety in this game is all of the different types of arcana, which is your main way of attacking. There's 6 different arcanas like we talked about earlier: earth, wind, fire, lightning, water, and chaos. With chaos only being unlocked once you beat the game, and it only has 7 spells total. But you only unlock 1 chaos spell per completion, so you won't get too many of them. The game also has all the arcana being strong against one another, like it's a Pokemon type. But I'll be honest, inside my runs, I never noticed any difference whatsoever while using any arcana, so I never bothered learning the differences. But I did find this helpful image on the wiki that did tell me the differences if you care, but I'll be honest, I didn't see anything. The game has 206 arcana spells total, and in my playtime, I never unlocked all of them. But I also had the tendency to only use the exact same arcana spells the entire time. I messed around with it here and there, but I found some arcana spells that I thought worked really well and I never bothered changing. And that can help segue into the next point in this video, which is the problems with this game. Wizard of Legend as a whole is a good game with a good community. It has an impressive review score on Steam with a 91% positive review score with over 14,000 reviews. That is an impressive number to say the least, especially for a small indie game like this. But in my opinion, there's a handful of negatives and frustrating aspects in the game, and well, it's time I say what they are. The biggest problem for me is the lack of content as a whole. Really, after you clear one single run, you don't feel too much incentive to play the game again, as nothing notable changes besides being able to buy cursed relics and unlocking 1 chaos arcana spell. On top of that, the game is pretty hard and unfair in times in my opinion, as you have no iframes in the game. And if you don't know what the term iframes means, it stands for invincibility frames, where you have a small window where you cannot get hurt. It usually happens after you get hurt. Once you get like a half a second or a second of invincibility, so you don't just get damage stacked on top of you. And in a game like this, I feel like you need them. The enemies in this game can easily stack damage onto you, and with how scarce healing can be, it can feel pretty unfair. When I streamed this game, I said I felt the developers made the game harder than it needed to be to help make up for the lack of content. And while I still had fun and beat the game once in about 10 hours, I still felt the same feelings after clearing the game. That's like the biggest problem in my opinion, but there's also still some more little problems scattered around, and we'll talk about those now. Firstly, let's talk about the shop. I felt all the shops minus the shop selling relics were essentially useless. Most of my runs, I'd only bother buying relics or a potion and ignore every other shop. And really, the only time I bought a potion was because healing was so scarce. The game has like 5 or 6 shops total. We talked about it earlier, but really, the shop that sold relics and the 1 potion per floor was definitely the most important one and the only one I cared about. Sadly, I'm not done. Earlier, we were talking about variety in the game, and I mentioned how I didn't really change up my item. And after a certain amount of time with my first clear, that was very true. I found arcana spells that were very good, and the cloak where I received more heals felt like a necessity to keep me alive. I didn't feel like I sucked at the game, or maybe I did, but that cloak felt like a necessity for me to stay alive with how much extra healing it gave me. Those are really my main problems in the game. Short runs, not enough content, not enough healing, redundant shops that feel pretty pointless, and no incentive to try new items. And on top of that, no iframes, making the game feel pretty unfair at times. And now I know the developers aren't really changing anything about this game, and that's not really a big deal. But I feel maybe offering chaos gems to try new arcanas, spells, cloaks, anything like that would help maybe make the game a little bit better, or more incentive to play again. Or hell, maybe have like a new type of mode where you can play all 5 worlds at once in one singular run. That could be pretty cool. And then on top of that, there's one more thing I didn't even mention, which can be bad depending on how you look at it, is that this game has no story whatsoever. I felt when I played the game, I felt no story and no idea why. You can read some stuff in the beginning, but the story felt non-existent, really. There's a lot that this game could change for me to enjoy it more, but I don't want to sound like I hated the game. I had a good time, but was just more disappointed with it after hearing so many positive things about the game and having so many people recommend it to me. I still got all the achievements, and that took me about 15 hours or so. And I'm not really trying to upset anyone with this video. I just wanted to express how I felt with this game after experiencing it myself. I'd still recommend it for people with it only being $15, but I think it has some glaring negatives. I appreciate you watching as always. Let me know what you think, if you loved Wizard of Legends and you played it yourself, or if you were, a little bit more disappointed with it when you played. Let me know in the comments below, and big shout out to the people that support me on Patreon still. Appreciate the patience with these videos. They take time to make. But thank you for watching and supporting. Like and subscribe if you liked it, I guess, and I'll see you next time.